How is it pronounced? Ren Group.
Welcome back to Wake Up Cricket. It's 8 a.m. It's Wake Up Cricket powered by Pavilion Picks. How many of you all expected the RCB and the RR price point to be almost similar? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about and a lot of things in the world of cricket. Now, before we get into things, like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff, let's get into it.
Well, so let's dive right into it. Rajasthan Royals sold for rupees 15,000 crore to US based entrepreneur. A US led consortium has reportedly acquired Rajasthan Royals for USD 1.63 billion, setting a new benchmark in the Indian Premier League. Meanwhile, bidding for RCB intensifies, with valuations expected to cross USD 2 billion following their historic 2025 title and massive global demand. The deal, overseen by the global investment bank Rain Group, comes after weeks of intense bidding. Somani, a serial tech entrepreneur with deep roots in sports data and AI, was already a minority investor in the franchise. However, this new acquisition, backed by heavyweights including Rob Walton of the Walmart family and Ham family, owners of NFL's Detroit Lions, marks one of the largest private equity entries into Indian sports to date. While the Royals board, chaired by Manoj Badale, had recently rejected a $1.7 billion offer from Columbia Pacific Capital Partners at a CPCP due to executability concerns, the Somani bid offered the strategic alignment and financial immediacy the franchise sought. While the Rajasthan sale setting a new price floor, market analysts now expect the RCB valuation to comfortably breach the 2 billion USD mark. Currently, owners Diageo, operating through United Spirits, have set an aggressive March 31st deadline to finalize the transaction. Industry insiders suggest that RCB's immense brand equity and digital footprint allow it to command a premium of at least 15 to 20% over the Royals. This intense bidding war underscores the growing appetite for blue chip IPL franchises among institutional investors who see long term growth of the league's expanding match calendar and global viewership. The ownership change will take effect only after IPL 2026 season.
Cool. So one thing's clear, every time an analyst says something, there's a good chance it might not happen, as you'll find out in the next piece of news. But very interestingly, Rajasthan Royals has gone for a good price, and I think for the right reasons as well. Of course, it's been one of the franchises that's been there from the inception of the IPL. They were the winners of the very first tournament as well. So there is a history, there is a pipeline of Indian cricketers that Rajasthan Royals has always had a lot of youngsters in the likes of Riyan Parag, Vaibhav Suryavanshi, Sanju Samson from back in the day. So they do have a lot of things going for them. And this was an auction or a bidding war that was going on for the longest time. And you can see the kind of valuation it's got and the kind of people who've been interested in this trade, right? That's something that caught my eye because it's US based companies. It is people who are associated with Walmart. It is people who are associated with the Detroit Lions. So clearly the IPL is starting to stand out as a really big brand, and it goes beyond just the fact that cricket is played in a few nations, right? This is a US based company. They might have nothing to do with cricket, but they see what a big business this is. They see how big the IPL is, and they see that this is a huge opportunity for them to be able to make some really good money. And so it makes sense why this deal has happened, but more on this when we discuss about RCB as well.
And we continue talking about money as RCB2 gets sold. Birla, part of consortium that buys RCB for staggering USD 1.78 billion. USL, the previous owner, said both RCB teams will now be owned and operated by the consortium. A consortium comprising Indian and overseas business entities has successfully bought full ownership of Royal Challengers Bangalore franchise for an eye-watering sum of about USD 1.78 billion. That is around Indian national rupees 16,660 crore approx. The all cash deal was announced by the United Spirits Limited, the existing owner of the RCB teams in IPL and the WPL. As per a media release issued by the USL, its board has approved the sale of the franchise to a consortium comprising Aditya Birla Group, the Times of India Group, Bolt Ventures, and Blackstone's Perpetual Private Equity Strategy (BXPE). After this deal, USL said both RCB teams, which are being run by its subsidiary Royal Challengers Sports Private Limited, will now be owned and operated by the consortium.
Now, a lot of people were surprised by the similarity in terms of price point between the Rajasthan Royals and the Royal Challengers Bangalore. And in fact, in the previous news, a lot of people even predicted that RCB will be valued for more than 2 billion. But there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. And of course, RCB have Virat Kohli. RCB is a big brand. RCB also won last year's IPL. So you would think that they would be sold for a very high price. But when you look at Rajasthan Royals, they have a lot of things working for them in terms of why the price points are very similar. Not only are they a big brand, they might not sell as much as RCB, but Royal Challengers Bangalore, the Royals brand is there all around the world. It's there in different franchises, and they almost have a brand that seems subtle, but it's like I said, it's there all around the world. And also players like Praatibh already said, the players in the team itself are future stars, right? You have Yashasvi Jaiswal, who is one of the best test batters in the world. He should be in all formats, and it's something people often talk about. Riyan Parag is a young captain. Sanju Samson was part of the squad. Kumar Sangakkara is a big part of the Royal Challengers Bangalore, not just a coaching staff member. And then you have Dhruv Jurel, again a test batter. Now, it's not just the players, but the brand itself that's been working around all over the world, being in different franchise tournaments, being part of aren't Royals part of the MLS? Not the MLS,
MLC,
yeah.
SA20, PAL Royals, for
Yeah,
example.
so they're there all around the world.
Yeah.
Now, Royal Challengers Bangalore, what doesn't work for them is the fact that they don't know who they're going to bank on after Virat Kohli. And as much as you look at the past of a commodity, you also look at the future and how it will be valued after a certain point. So you don't know what RCB is going to look like once Virat Kohli retires, because they don't have a future star set. Even with Rajat Patidar, he doesn't have a lot of years, and he's not going to sell as much as Virat Kohli. So keeping all of this in mind, when you think about it, of course, makes sense for why the price points are very, very similar, and good for Royal Challengers Bangalore.
Not so good for Chennai Super Kings, albeit in a different context. Spencer Johnson replaces injured Nathan Alice at CSK. Chennai Super Kings have brought in Australia left-arm pacer Spencer Johnson as a replacement for the injured Nathan Alice for IPL 2026. Johnson will join CSK for INR 1.5 crore, with Ellis ruled out of the tournament after he aggravated an old hamstring injury in the domestic One Day Cup final on March 11th. Johnson, 30, has represented Australia in 5 ODIs and 8 T20Is and has overall played 71 T20s. He, however, hasn't played top flight cricket since the IPL last year, when he suffered a back injury and was subsequently ruled out of the BBL and the 2026 T20 World Cup. Johnson has played in the IPL before, representing Gujarat Titans and Kolkata Knight Riders in 2024 and 2025, respectively. He was a big surprise buy during the accelerated round towards the end of 2024 auction, going for INR 10 crore to Titans, having entered the auction at a base price of INR 50 lakh. He picked up 4 wickets in 5 matches that season. And in the 2025 season, where KKR bought him for INR 2.80 crore, he took 1 wicket in 4 matches. He was released by KKR ahead of the 2026 auction, where he went unsold. Including Johnson, CSK's overseas fast bowling contingent now includes Matt Henry, Jamie Overton, and Zach Fawkes, and the Indians in the mix are Khalil Ahmed, Anshul Kamboj, Gurjapneet Singh, and Mukesh Chaudhary, apart from all-rounders Shivam Dubey and Aman Khan as pace bowling options.
All right, so no surprises, yet another injury, another Australian who's going to be pulling out of the IPL, right? Nathan Ellis was going to be a huge part of this lineup, especially when you look at the fast bowlers on display. You know that for CSK, there's a lot of bowlers, Indian fast bowlers specifically, who can open the bowling for you. They can bowl well with the new ball. You have the likes of Khalil Ahmed, Anshul Kamboj. So these players, they'll be more effective in the power play. But when it comes to those middle overs, along with someone like Noor Ahmed, you need a fast bowler there who can maybe hit the deck, especially at Chepauk, because the ball will grip in that surface. And Nathan Ellis, with all of his experience, having captained Australia, but even more importantly, the kind of variations that he brings to the fore, his back of the hand slow ball, his off cutters, would have been the perfect foil for that middle overs, right? And now that's become a huge issue, because Matt Henry, we saw in the World Cup, Matt Henry has done a decent job, to be fair, but will he be as effective in the middle overs? He's also someone who can bowl with the new ball and in the death. Apart from that, you have the likes of Zach Fawkes, you have the likes of Jamie Overton, who has been expensive, generally speaking. And so it's probably the biggest miss for them in terms of an overseas fast bowler, because Nathan Ellis was almost a sure starter in that CSK squad. Now, with the likes of Spencer Johnson coming in, it's a little interesting because you do get the variety of someone who is a left arm pacer. But once again, he's someone who does prefer bowling with that new ball. He's the kind of bowler who gets it to swing up front a little bit. And of course, he balls that heavy ball as well. But now it just tinkers around with their combinations. Right? How exactly do they go about this? Who are the overseas players that they pick? Because Noor Ahmed's going to be there. There's possibly a couple of batters at the top who will be, or actually that might not be the
Yeah.
case considering Indian players are there. But yeah, it's just a new headache for them to sort of figure out.
And Livingston might be some sort of headache for the England management because of statements that he has been issuing. So Key says, no way Livingston is not up for selection. Rob Key has insisted that Liam Livingston will continue to be considered for England selection after his explosive interview with ESPN Cricket for last week and defended his communication with him, saying, you are always going to have people who are upset. Livingston, who has not played international cricket since last year's Champions Trophy, was highly critical of the England setup and suggested that his chances of a recall relied on a change in management. He accused the setup of avoiding difficult conversations after minimal contact before his before his central contract expired and claimed that Key had told him he had 100 more important things to do than speak to him about his prospects of selection. Key, whose position as managing director was confirmed as safe on Monday, said that England had considered recalling Livingston for their white ball tour to Sri Lanka in January. He added that he remains in contention for selection moving forward, challenging him to prove that he is back to his best and scoring runs. Look, I'm not going to go into private conversations, Key told Sky Sports News. Obviously, there's another side to that conversation as I saw it. What I did say to Liam at the end of what was fairly a touchy phone call, to say the least, was that there's no way I see a player of Liam Livingston's ability not being up for selection for England.
Now, like the news suggests, this confirmation came on this. All of this came about after Monday when Rob Key, Brendan McCullum, and Ben Stokes were confirmed with their positions. Yesterday, even though it wasn't the official news, I did talk about how Ben Stokes put out an Instagram post noting, and it was a whole thing about how he still loves cricket, wants to captain England. It was after the confirmation that all three are safe at their job, and then Sky Sports, Sky Cricket to be more specific, had a whole interview with Rob Key. It was a very, very interesting and honest interview with Rob Key where Nasser Hussain had challenging questions. He questioned Rob Key about some of the things that happened with the England team, some of the things that happened with baseball, and especially with team selection. And he then he brought up the Liam Livingston stuff. And Rob Key I thought, he wasn't the most honest, at least if that's what it felt like as a third person looking at that answer. He wasn't the most honest in terms of how he went about answering. Of course, not everyone's going to be happy, and there will be some players who are upset, but he didn't address the fact that the communication wasn't all that well, and he wasn't honest with Liam Livingston. And it's very easy to, in an interview, tell the interviewer that he doesn't want to get interviewee. Tell the interviewer that he doesn't want to get into private conversations because that's what you'll tell when you haven't done well in that conversation to begin with.
True.
And I feel like that's what happened in that conversation. But all that being said, I thought by the end of the entire interview with Sky Cricket, I thought it was a very honest interview where there were questions that were challenging and Rob Key didn't do a good job answering them, but he's safe at his job, so I feel like he'll be happy anyways. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how Rob Key, Brandon McCullum, and Ben Stokes do by the end of the tenure. A lot of people were surprised that all three of them were safe at their job. But yeah, let's see how England cricket shapes up.
Moving on to the next story, India picked Kashvi Gautam, Anushka Sharma for South Africa T20I tour. Seam bowling all-rounder Kashvi Gautam is in line for a T20I debut after being included in India's squad for 5-match T20I series in South Africa in April. Gautam has played 1 Test and 6 ODIs and was in action in both longer formats during the recent tour of Australia, but she has not yet played a T20I. Anushka Sharma has also received her maiden India call-up. The 22-year-old off-spin bowling all-rounder has impressed for Gujarat Giants in her first season of the WPL in 2025, scoring 177 runs, with 124 of them coming in boundaries. Anushka was then brought onto the India A team for the Rising Stars Asia Cup last month and is now on course to make her first appearance at senior level in international cricket. India's selectors have also included Uma Chetri in the squad. ostensibly as backup to regular keeper Richard Ghosh. Chetri has replaced the 17-year-old G. Kamalini, who has not played an international game since her T20I debut in the home series against Sri Lanka in December. She was part of the T20I squad that recently toured Australia but did not feature in the series that India won 2-1. Left arm spinner Vaishnavi Sharma, who played all five T20Is against Sri Lanka but remained on the bench through the Australia T20Is, has also been left out. All rounder Amanjot Kaur, who endured a tough time in Australia, scoring 3 and 1 in her two T20Is appearances and conceded 30 runs in 3 overs, is also out of the squad. Gautam is one of the four seam options in India's squad alongside Arundhati Reddy, Renuka Singh, and Kranti God. Deepti Sharma, Sri Charani, and Shanka Patil make up the spin attack with Vaishnavi out. The South Africa tour will kick off in Durban, which hosts the first two T20Is on April 17th and 19th before proceeding to Johannesburg for the third and fourth T20Is on April 22nd and 25th. Benoni will host the series finale on April 27th.
Now keep an eye out for all of these selections, right? Because you have this South Africa T20 series, then you have India going to England to play T20s, and then it's the T20 World Cup in England. So India have about 8 games that are currently confirmed that they will be playing before that World Cup itself. And so squad combination is going to be very important. Now, at least around 11 out of the 15, 16 positions are mostly going to be the same. You still have your normal players who will be featuring, who've been doing well for India all this while in T20Is. But the selections here make a lot of sense. As something that we saw in the Australia series was Kashvi Gautam do really well, not only with the ball, but also specifically with the bat. Because if you look at rest of India's fast bowlers at the moment, Kashvi Gautam is the only one who can actually bat.
True.
And so, considering it's going to be a T20 World Cup, considering you want to lengthen your batting order to be able to maximize on run scoring, it makes sense for India to be making this selection in the first place. And alongside, if you look at Vaishnavi Sharma, for example, although she started in Sri Lanka, she hadn't gotten any games, and Sri Charani has just been superb ever since she's come into the Indian side. And so it's more or less clear that Sri Charani is your first pick left arm spinner, and when you know that maybe she is going to just be playing in the 11, then it makes sense for them to have swapped out Vaishnavi Sharma. As with a couple of other selections, Amanjot Kaur could just be a case of managing her workload, and Kamalini was too young, was not getting any games, so maybe they decided they just wanted the backup of Uma Chetri.
Now, before we move on to the meme, one of our regular viewers, that is Dutt Atre, he's mentioning that RCB team name, would it be changed, or would that stay? It's highly likely that it would get changed because RCB is very specifically referring to a brand, and with the new consortium getting involved, I think they'd want some of their identity onto the name as well. Now, moving on to the meme, and there's somebody feeling the FOMO. It's for the boys to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so the meme, right? So the caption says Jadeja after seeing CSK's Road 26 event picks and clips. Yeah, I feel like one player that would have been a real miss was Jadeja, and a lot of people did think about him during that event. But you have to know the fact that a lot of people who were involved were either pundits who are now players who are now pundits or part of the coaching staff, like Bravo, for example, who was part of the Kolkata Knight Riders but showed up on that event. No player who's currently playing the IPL was called, especially the likes of Jadeja, because then that's just a little too much. No? If you think about it, because he's currently part of the Rajasthan Royals, it's a whole thing of him coming back to Rajasthan Royals. Now, as an RR management, you wouldn't want Jadeja, after building up so much hype, to go back to a CSK event, even though he's been part of the CSK and he's a legend in that club itself. You wouldn't want that. And as a CSK management, as much as you do want Jadeja to be back, you don't want a player who's currently playing in the IPL to be back and then play against you, because that in itself is a whole thing to hype about. So yeah, it does make sense. But then when you think about it, it's quite sad that Jadeja wasn't present, because he was, I think, the only one apart from Aswin, of course. Even Aswin he wasn't free on the dates, which I think is such a big lie. I just didn't think he cared enough to show up on a day where a team that I think, according to him, betrayed him and not buying him a couple of years ago. I think it's just that. I think it's saltiness. I've called it out. I've said it. But yeah, except for him, I think Jadeja was the only other big player to not have been there. I can't think of any other player. Maybe an Albi Morkel or someone maybe. But apart from that, yeah. In Indians, I think Jadeja was the only one to not be there apart from Ashwin. It's a real miss. but what can you do?
Yeah. Plus, I mean, with the support staff, the franchisees also gave special permissions, because there was this whole post that went out thanking those two franchisees,
Hmm.
KKR and GT, I think it was, if
And
I'm not wrong,
SRH,
and
because
SRH.
Muttiah Muralidharan
Yeah,
showed up.
yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense. There's nothing much more to add. Jaddu, obviously, he would have liked to be there with his former teammates and everything, but it's okay. That's how sport goes, and hopefully, it turns up for Rajasthan Royals this season. But that's mostly it from us today
Yes.
at Wake Up Cricket, powered by Pavilion Picks. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe. Definitely get us to 500 subscribers if we somehow magically aren't already there. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
That's right. Peace.